Hi, I'm Tim Shaughnessy, economics professor at LSUS. We all know that economics students love active learning exercises. Okay, so how do we find the equilibrium price?
Where the curve cross!
But let's face it, not everything you teach is suited for an active learning exercise. And so, can anyone tell me the 6 determinants of demand? When you have lots of information you need to know, students end up resorting to memorization. It's widely thought that active learning and memorization are sort of mutually exclusive, but that's not true. There are many techniques that not only dramatically improve your retention, but that also require students to use their imagination. One of these techniques that we use in my class I call the Making Macro and Microeconomics Memorable memory device.
I love it. I've used it in Dr. Shaughnessy's class, and it's helped me in other classes too.
Really only heard of the new technique. I haven't had the opportunity to use it yet, but I think it would be very helpful.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. I was in the hallway and I just got dragged in here.
Okay, so let me show you the technique. First, begin with a familiar scene. Let's start with a home entryway. So this scene is familiar to me. It's the entryway of my own house, and well, it's kind of humble on the outside, I suppose. As you go through the front door, though, we've spruced up the entryway a little bit. I'm pretty proud of it. Okay, this isn't really my house. But here's a more typical entryway of a house. So we need to pick out 3 locations, and obviously you can add more, but we'll do 3 at this point. And we want our eyes to move from each of those locations in order, and we want to rehearse that so we make that same movement every single time, so that our eyes always move from point number 1 to 2 to 3 in the exact same order. So our first location in this entryway will be just coming straight through the front door. Our second location will be this entryway rug on the floor. And as we move our eyes to the left, we see that entryway table. That will be our third location. And we will have a fourth in a minute. And you can maybe see other images in this particular scene that could act as other locations as well. Okay, so you're teaching a history of economic thought class, and you want to remember Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx in order as 3 of the prominent early economists. So this mnemonic device is technically the loci mnemonic, loci for location. We have our 3 locations, and we have our 3 economists who we want to remember in order. And how this technique works is we come up with an image that we place at each location that will represent for us what we want to remember. Now the image does not have to be literal, it just has to be memorable. So for our first location, our first economist was Adam Smith. The image we will use is an anvil. Anvil reminds me of a blacksmith. Smith hopefully reminds me of Adam Smith. Our second location, and we wanted to remember David Ricardo. I thought a bowl of rice would work for that. Rice, R-I-C, Ricardo. Our third economist was Karl Marx at our third location, that entryway table. So why don't we place Groucho Marx sitting on the entryway table. Your images don't have to be static or silent either. In fact, it's better for retention if they're not. In our History of Economic Thought class, we want to also remember Francis Edgeworth, so we need a 4th location. We will add a coat rack to our entryway. The image we will place on it is a price tag with a big $sign on it, and we don't want it to be static this time. We will incorporate a little bit of movement, so the coat rack is kind of wobbly. It's on its edge, about to fall over. So hopefully that will remind you, the coat rack on its edge, big price tag, what is it worth? You can even picture someone looking like Francis Edgeworth standing, getting ready to catch the coat rack, tipping over, asking, what is this worth? Images can also sort of be built upon to embed more information. Let's say we want to remember a few more details about Adam Smith, other than that he was just the first economist in our list. So as our mind's eye goes from the first location to the second, again, remember at the first location, as we come through the door, we are stopped by this big anvil. But we want to remember other things. Let's put a little detail onto our anvil here. We're going to add a little Scottish tartan to remind us that Adam Smith was Scottish. Adam Smith also wrote The Wealth of Nations, so on top of our answer, we will put a little globe that's actually a bank. You can see the slot at the top. You could even picture a couple coins dropping in there. Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, the same year that the U.S. declared independence from Great Britain. So why don't we put a little naval sea battle there to remind us of the significant year of both of those events. So the technique is pretty simple to learn. It takes a bit of time to rehearse the scene, but you should stress to your students that they should develop their own scenes, locations, and images that they will remember. It doesn't take much time for a student to sort of mentally reconstruct what their own entryway looks like in their own house. A preliminary test of the effectiveness of the loci technique was done using one Principles of Macroeconomics class in the spring semester of 2011 and two Principles Macro classes in the fall semester of 2011. The material that was associated with the loci technique were the 8 guideposts of economic thinking in the first chapter of Gortney and Stroop. 8 guideposts. There were 8 locations in a living room that I gave them. Students were given a sheet describing the technique, and it was stressed to them that they should look at the sheet. They might find it useful in studying for the test, and they might even find it useful in other classes. After that, about 3 weeks passed between time of first mentioning the sheet and when the actual exam took place. 41 students read the mnemonic sheet, and 66 did not. So, how did they do? Again, the test contained questions specifically related to the material on the mnemonic sheet. The students who read the sheet did score better on those questions than those who didn't read it, but that doesn't really tell us what we want to know, since the students who read the sheet may have just been better students in general. So we compared the two groups' performance on the other questions on the test, questions that were not related to the material on the mnemonic sheet. As you can see, the students who read the sheet actually performed worse on the non-mnemonic questions, so we could hypothesize that the sheet readers were slightly worse students than the non-sheet readers. But what we do see is that those who read the sheet had a significant improvement in their performance on the mnemonic-related questions than those who did not read the sheet, as revealed by the horizontal difference in their scores. The difference is significant for those who read the sheet and is insignificant for those who didn't. In other words, we have evidence that those who read the mnemonic help sheet did significantly better on the performance of those questions related to that content, and that those students who did not read the mnemonic sheet did not demonstrate any significant difference in their performance. So what does that mean, class?
The technique works!